Good morning, friends. Let's talk about test and discussion here. How to approach this test and discussion. I am taking it in a sequence in which I will tell you the salient features and important images that one must remember in each system, followed by the MCQs which are in order given to you in the test. So the first thing is the introductory part and about the imaging in orthopedics. When we look at any talk which I take, the first image is always of my daughter who welcomes you to my programs called as Ortho Dhoom Dharaka. Ortho Dhoom Dharaka, also known as ODD, started in 2014 and in 2019 where we're sitting today, it is one of the most trusted program in orthopedics. When I look at orthopedics as a subject, when I started teaching, this was the first slide which I ever made, thanking God that He gave me a responsibility to serve medico world. As a teacher, it is my responsibility to take care of my students, and as a student of orthopedics, it is my responsibility to give you the correct information which is not overcrowding in your brain. So I will try to make things simple and easy so that you remember. This is my name and I train people to crack questions. The first thing that one must remember in orthopedics is that orthopedics means a combination of two words where ortho means straight and pedics means child. So orthopedics means straight child, and this term was coined by Dr. Nicolas André, who was a French. So he was appropriately called as the father of orthopedics, and in case you have a question where Nicolas André is not an option, then you will choose H.O. Thomas as the father. One more term that you must remember is father of modern orthopedics, where we have another Britisher called as Robert Jones. Thomas and Jones both are Britishers, and Jones is nephew of Thomas. Another question which can be asked to you. Thomas, two things that you must never forget: Thomas test, Thomas splint. Thomas test is for hip flexion deformity assessment. Thomas splint was designed for tuberculosis knee by Dr. Thomas for his own wife, but now it is used to immobilize the lower limbs. So this is about the scientist which you cannot forget. Going to next. When I look at a bone and I look at an X-ray of a bone, one thing which I want to tell you very clearly: the diaphysis is also called as a mid of a bone, and epi and meta are called as the ends of a bone. When I look at a diaphyseal lesion which one cannot forget, I will like you to remember Ewing sarcoma. And when I look at the metaphyseal area, I want you to remember infections and tumors. They most commonly affect the metaphysis. So when they say ends of a bone, epiphysis or metaphysis, metaphysis, M for metaphysis, M for most common area for infections and tumors. This is what you must remember. Going to next. When I look at a bone, our bone has got an organic part and a bone has got inorganic part. So what you must remember, bone word has one. So it has got type 1 collagen. Type 1. So type 1 collagen is there in bone. And it is responsible for tensile strength of a bone. Its defect causes osteogenesis imperfecta, where the bones will fracture very frequently. This is about the organic component. The predominant aspect, the inorganic component, is formed by calcium hydroxyapatite, which is Ca10PO46OH2, in short written as Ca5PO43OH-. Either of them is possible. It is the predominant salt of the bone, very commonly asked to use. Also remember that osteoid is called as an immature bone, and the bone which is mature and mineralized with the calcium is called as osteon. Osteoid and osteon are two terms which you must remember. In metabolic disorders, they are very commonly asked to you. Another flow chart on bone metabolism which you must remember. Remember, parathyroid hormone PTH acts on the hormone receptors which are present on osteoblast. That is why low dose PTH is used in diseases which have weak bone like osteoporosis to stimulate the osteoblast. Whereas in normal doses, low dose only the osteoblast is stimulated. In normal doses, osteoblast will release rank ligand. This rank ligand is inhibited by two drugs called as estrogen and denosumab. And if rank ligand is allowed to interact with the rank receptor in osteoclast, it stimulates it and causes remodeling of the bone in normal, and in hyperparathyroidism causes the lithic cavities. The drugs called as bisphosphonates and calcitonin directly inhibit the osteoclast. Estrogen and denosumab, they act on the rank ligand. Parathyroid hormone stimulates the osteoblast directly, but there is one drug which acts on both the pathways. It is called as strontium. So it stimulates the formation, inhibits the resorption. This is what you must remember from this important flowchart. Coming to what all can you see on X-rays. Remember, on X-ray you can see the cortex, and the break in the cortex is labeled as a fracture. On X-ray in the center you can see the marrow. Marrow is also called as an intraosseous area inside the bone, and it happens to be one of the most important areas where the diseases in the skeleton occurs. So you have to see the marrow to identify many of the diseases. What further your X-ray cannot show is a cartilage. Cartilage, cartilage, also called as cartilage, is made by type 2 collagen in the joints. Hyaline cartilage, cartilage is type 2 collagen, bone 1 is type 1 collagen. Cartilage is radiolucent, not seen on X-rays. Hence, if they mention in a statement, patient has a reduced joint space, the space occupied by the cartilage, it means that the patient has got a destroyed cartilage often called as arthritis. Arthritis is per se not inflammation of the joint, but it is reduced cartilage. What further you need to remember about X-rays is, it can show you the soft tissue planes, the muscle plane and the fat plane separated by the fascia are called as the soft tissue planes. So the skin and subcutaneous fat above with the fascia beneath. There are two layers that you see. And if the skin and subcutaneous fat, they go away, leaving the fascia and underneath structures, it's called as a degloving injury, which was asked this year in NB pattern 2019 exam. So degloving, the skin and the subcutaneous tissue separated from the fascia underneath. So you can see the soft tissue planes on an X-ray, and if there's an inflammation of a bone like infection or osteomyelitis, these soft tissue planes will merge into each other because there will be swelling. This is what you must remember on an X-ray. One more question that came in AIIMS November 2014 was that the X-rays can pick up the glass pieces. Hence, X-rays are usually the first investigations in orthopedics that you see. Look at this X-ray. This is showing you the femur, the tibia, the fibula, and one bone here which people miss out, patella. This is a knee joint which has got a normal joint space on both the sides. When there is destruction of cartilage on one area, the joint space is reduced. Not only reduced, if you look at the axis of the bone, the distal part goes medially, that is towards the midline. When the distal part goes towards the midline, it's called as a varus. Varus, distal part goes towards midline, and when the distal part goes laterally, it's called as valgus. So if this is the elbow, if the foramen and go medially, varus. If they go laterally, valgus. Varus, valgus. So varus and valgus are two features that very commonly are asked in the images, and you must remember when we look at this X-ray, this image, the clinical image of a patient, if I look here both the legs, they are going medially. So they are going medially, varus. So they make an alphabet O. So they are seen in O, osteoarthritis, when they make an O. And then this image, they go lateral. So they are making an R going out. Seen in RA, that is rheumatoid arthritis. This is what O, osteoarthritis, R, rheumatoid arthritis. So genu varum occurs in osteoarthritis. Genu valgum occurs in rheumatoid arthritis. Remember this. So revising again, break in the cortex is fracture. Osteomyelitis, we will have loss of soft tissue plane seen after 24 hours of osteomyelitis. Tuberculosis also will have loss of curvature of spine, again a soft tissue release. When you have curvature in the spine, you normally have cervical lordosis going in, thoracic kyphosis, and lumbar lordosis. Question asked in AIIMS November 2018. They have asked you about curvatures of spine. If there is spasm of the muscle because of infection, there is a loss of curvature in the spine, which is seen earlier than the reduced disc space, and joint space is cartilage, and reduced disc space means arthritis. Remember this on the X-rays. Some important points on the X-rays that one cannot forget. Around the shoulder, remember clavicle is the highest point. Just beneath the clavicle you have coracoid. This is the head of humerus. This is the glenoid. Ratio is 1:4. That is why a small glenoid cannot take care of the large head, and this is the most common joint which is prone to dislocate. Around the elbow, remember this is the radial head. Articulates with an area called as capitulum. Capitulum is the first area to have ossification around elbow, which is very commonly asked. If I have to do MBBS, I must remember how to draw a wrist joint. The lower end of radius, over which a sleeping bone called as scaphoid, board-shaped bone, Next to it, the lunate, which is very commonly asked in exams, they show an arrow in it. They form a wrist joint called as a radiocarpal joint. The lower end of ulna is not a part of the wrist joint per se. The question asked in NB pattern 2019 exam, which of the following bone does not form a part of the wrist, and the answer was ulna. So wrist joint, very commonly asked, and remember, scaphoid sleeps over the radius. S for scaphoid resembles the digit 5. So scaphoid ossifies at the age of 5, and in the center, remember one bone called as capitate, which happens to be the largest carpal bone. C for carpal, C for capitate, and it's also the first to ossify. So capitate is the first carpal bone to ossify, and this is the largest carpal bone. C for carpal, C for capitate. This is what you must remember. When I look at the lateral view of the wrist joint, if I look at the lower end radius, the lunate sits over it. Lunate means moon, and where do you see the moon in the wrist? Lateral view. So this is called as lunate. So when in the lateral view between the radius, the lunate and the capitate, there is a long line going through, it means it's a normal joint. But if the lunate comes out, drops down, and the other bones stay in, it's called as a lunate dislocation. And when the lunate stays in and the other carpal bones comes out, it's called as a perilunate dislocation. This is a question that has been asked last year. When I look at the X-ray of a pelvis, if I look at the sacroiliac area, this is very, very important for us to remember. SI area is affected in which disease? Yes, ankylosing spondylitis. If you have sacroiliitis, you diagnose ankylosing spondylitis. If you do not have sacroiliitis, you do not diagnose ankylosing spondylitis. That's a dictum. In the knee joint, remember that the patella is a bone which is towards the anterior aspect. Remember, patella is a bone which is towards the anterior aspect in the knee joint. And at the ankle, remember there are three malleolus. The medial malleolus formed by the lower end of tibia, the lateral malleolus formed by the lower end of fibula, and the posterior malleolus which is formed by the posterior aspect of lower end of tibia. Right, so now we will look at one of the important areas called as the views on X-rays which are done in orthopedics. Von Rosen was a man who throughout his life worked on a disease called as developmental dysplasia of hip, in short called as DDH, and Von Rosen splint or Von Rosen view, it's all for DDH. So Von Rosen for DDH. Judet throughout his life worked on an area called as acetabulum. So Judet views, Judet classification criteria, acetabulum. One of the very important things that you must remember, that at the upper end of femur, the area of neck and head along with the pubic rami, they make an arch. If there is a fracture in the pubic rami or the neck or the head or a joint dislocates, then this arch is disrupted. This is called as a Shenton's arch. So three important images, Judet view, Von Rosen view, and the Shenton's arch are very commonly asked. Out of them, Shenton's arch is number one. X-rays are usually the first investigation that you carry out. But subsequent to it, if you want to look at the different parts of a bone, the cortex of a bone can be seen by C for cortex, C for CT. MRI, M for MRI, M for marrow, can show you the bone marrow, like this is a lumbosacral spine. MRI can show you the marrow. MRI can show you the cartilage. Between the two vertebrae, there is cartilage, the fibrocartilage shown on MRI. and then it can show you the soft tissues behind, like the spinal cord or the muscles. Practically in our body, everything is in marrow that starts in the skeletal system. So MRI is investigation of choice in orthopedics for radiology. X-ray is the first investigation, but the next out of the X-rays you have MRI. If you don't know what to mark in orthopedics, mark MRI. MRI is a safe guess. MRI or CT scan, different cuts can be shown. They can show you the cuts of a coronal plane, any body part, and ask you. They can show you a sagittal cut, sagittal view of the knee, as MRI is a very commonly asked image, or they can show you a transverse or a coronal, transverse or a axial cut. So coronal cut, sagittal cut, or a transverse cut can be shown in the exam. MRI has got two images, T1 and T2. T1 is more of anatomy because anatomy is first prof subject, so T1 is anatomy. T2 is pathology, that you must remember. So T1 anat, T2 path. This is what you must remember. So T1, 1 for anatomy, T1 will show you anatomy, T2 will show you pathology. So T2, how will you identify what is T2? Water, that is CSF or synovial fluid. When it appears white, that's T2. White water, 2 times W. So T2. Water is white on T2. It's black on T1. So remember that. T2 will show you pathology. If you have to see the entire body, the system for it is bone scan. Bone scan can show the entire skeletal system. B for bone scan, B for blastic activity. So osteoblastic activity can be picked up on bone scan. Remember that. B for bone scan, B for blastic activity. So if there is infection, osteoblast will come and repair that area of infection, bone scan positive. If there is a fracture, osteoblast will come and repair, bone scan positive. If there is a malignancy which stimulates the osteoblastic cells, prostate, yes, prostate causes osteoblastic metastasis in the bone, bone scan positive. So when I look at one of the common areas which are asked to you, stress fracture. What is a stress fracture? Suppose I stand on this table, I jump down. When I jump down once, it's a normal force on a normal bone. If I do that 10,000 times, it's an abnormal force on a normal bone. Abnormal force on a normal bone is called as a stress. So in cases of stress, right, the bone which will fracture will not break the cortex, will break the marrow. So investigation of choice, MRI. Marrow, MRI. Unilateral stress fracture, MRI. But when it has to be bilateral stress fracture, B for bilateral, B for bone scan, remember that. So until unless they don't mention in the exam bilateral stress fracture, you won't assume. And for stress fracture, choose MRI. Now, when I told you for metastases which are osteoblastic, you can pick up bone scan. Agreed. You are picking up the blastic cell, but what is more specific for a tumor cell? The tumor cell itself. So if you want to pick up a tumor, pick up the tumor cell. And how will you pick up a tumor cell? One of the investigation is PET scan. PET scan. What is PET scan? You give fluorodeoxyglucose to the patient. Cells which have got anaerobic metabolism will have an uptake. This is called as PET scan. So this is what is PET scan. So if I have metastasis, for multiple metastasis, PET scan is good. Yeah, agreed. When they have given you osteoblastic metastasis like prostate, in such situations, PET scan is not very specific. But when they ask you about single lesion, it's MRI. Remember, single lesion is MRI. Sometimes they can clinically give you this image in the exam where an inflamed leg is shown. And now you have to pick up what exactly are we going through. So we have an inflamed leg, red hot shiny skin. This looks like an infection. But what I want you to remember, even tumors in orthopedics, they present like infection. And two tumors which are known to do that are in the order Ewing sarcoma and osteosarcoma. So from this is what we learned, that when tumors and infection, they present each other, they can mimic. Both are metaphyseal, further worsens it. How will you differentiate? By tissue. Histopathology will differentiate it as a tumor, and organism growth on a culture will tell you it's an infection. So remember, whenever you're suspecting inflammation, take a tissue divided into two parts. One will go for histopath, second for culture. When we have osteomyelitis, The first investigation we do is an X-ray. Radiological investigation is MRI. But X-ray will become positive after 24 hours, whereas MRI within 6 hours. So the most sensitive investigation to become positive in osteomyelitis, and the first one to become positive is MRI, followed by bone scan, followed by X-rays, which takes more than 24 hours. CT scan is rarely used in osteomyelitis except for the chronic osteomyelitis, where it can be used to identify the dead bone composition and the coverage by a live bone around it. For bone tumors, we usually do an MRI. This is what you should remember. For infections and tumor, do a tissue diagnosis. Culture for infection, histopath for tumors. Next investigation in orthopedics is MRI, but the best investigation is always the biopsy or the tissue diagnosis. So the next investigation in orthopedics is MRI. Best is biopsy. B for best, B for biopsy, the gold standard. Developmental dysplasia of hip or DDH. The problem with DDH is it has got shallow acetabulum. And to see the aspect, investigation of choice is MRI, and the screening of hip instability is ultrasonography. That's how it goes. DDH, one of the most controversial area, hence the red slide. When I want to look at a joint, the order in which I will investigate a joint, the first thing is an X-ray, MRI to look at the cartilage and ligaments and the soft tissues. But then if you would be more specific, aspirate the fluid and send for cultures and investigation. So aspiration, which is always done by ultrasound guidance, or an arthroscopy, where you can go through a tunnel vision to look at the different components in a joint. Most common area where you see infections or do an arthroscopy is the knee joint, the largest joint in human body. Then we come to some periosteal reactions that we must know. Whenever a bone gets destroyed, it will announce to the world, I'm getting destroyed. And what will be the announcement? Called as periosteal reaction. When the reaction is only a single layer, it's called as a solid periosteal reaction, seen in benign tumors or osteomyelitis. When there is a periosteal reaction going out of the bone like a rays of a sun, it's called as a sun ray appearance. When you see a triangular piece of bone underneath the periosteum, it's called as Codman's triangle. Both of them can be seen in any malignant lesion called as a white zone, but both are usually seen in osteosarcoma. And then you can have multiple layers over the bone. This is called as lamellated or onion peel appearance. It can be seen in any chronic process or malignancies, but usually Ewing sarcoma. So onion peel appearance usually in Ewing's, and Codman's triangle and sun ray appearance usually in osteosarcoma are the examples of white zones. And solid periosteal reaction seen in osteomyelitis or benign tumor is an example of narrow zone. Similarly, I am showing you some images of the periosteal reaction, narrow zone, single lesion, solid periosteal reaction. Codman's triangle, example of white zone. Sun ray appearance, example of white zone. Onion peel appearance, usually seen in Ewing's, example of white zone. And then we need to know some classical radiological features. The first two we have already discussed. Sun ray appearance and Codman's triangle, osteosarcoma, but can be seen in any malignant lesion. Onion peel appearance, Ewing sarcoma, but can be seen in any malignant lesion or chronic osteomyelitis. So bubble appearance seen in GCT and osteoclastoma. If both the terms are given, choose GCT. Adamantinoma is second common. Patchy calcification, cartilaginous tumors, they calcify, and homogeneous calcification, osteosarcoma. So if you have to choose calcification, first option is chondrosarcoma, then chondroblastoma and osteosarcoma. Cartilaginous tumors more than the osteogenic tumors. This is one image you cannot forget. This is AIIMS November 2018 MCQ. They have shown you the lower end of radius. GCT, one of the most commonly asked question. GCT or giant cell tumor or a joint tumor going till the joint is the only bone tumor which can go to the joint, because tumors, they respect the joint, they respect the cartilage. GCT is the only one which does not. Infections, they eat the joint, they eat the cartilage. So giant cell tumor, it goes away from the joint, it goes till the joint. Even Robbins says it can involve the cartilage underneath, where all other tumors, they stay away from the joint. This is classical image of lower end radius. The dictum is tumor of lower end radius is GCT, TPO till proved otherwise. And then if you have patchy calcification, cartilaginous tumors, right? Chondrosarcoma more than chondroblastoma, but it's also called as motile calcification. And then when you have homogeneous calcification, which is seen in osteogenic tumor like osteosarcoma. And remember one controversial point I told you about DDH, MRI, and the second controversial point, sun ray appearance is a variety of periosteal reaction. Aggressive reactions are what I told you, sun ray appearance, Codman's triangle, or onion peel appearance. Non-aggressive are single layer, solid, thin, thick, and irregular. They are non-aggressive reactions seen in osteomyelitis or benign bone tumors. It means that a quiet lesion is there, right? Let's look at the MCQs from this section. Which bone does not form the part of a wrist joint? Wrist is a radiocarpal joint, radius, carpal, so ulna is not a part of the joint. Sun ray appearance in osteosarcoma, I told you it's a controversial point, and the answer is periosteal reaction. Most sensitive investigation for early bone infections. If you have to pick up the first thing, it's going to be MRI, followed by bone scan, and then X-rays. Right? So this is how you pick it up. MRI is not there, so you'll pick up the answer as bone scan. Stress fractures are diagnosed by spot on MRI. If they mention bilateral, then the answer is going to be bone scan. And then identify the marked structures. This I have already told you, learn to draw. This is lower end radius, this is ulna. Over the lower end radius, the bone that sleeps is scaphoid, and then the marked area is the lunate. Very, very commonly asked question. This is what you must remember. Learn to draw lower end of radius along with the wrist. So we go to infections now. When we look at the infections, this is one of the most important things that you must remember, that in orthopedics, the most common organism causing infections is Staphylococcus aureus. Ortho is staph. Acute injury, Staph aureus. Subacute injury, Staph aureus. Chronic injuries, Staph aureus. Humerus, Staph aureus. Hand, Staph aureus. Femur, Staph aureus. Spine, Staph aureus. More common than TB. Remember this. So ortho is staph. You know it, staph. You don't know staph. You are guessing staph. You're not guessing staph. It's all staph. They are married. Then let's have a look at some affairs that we have. Sickle cell anemia is salmonella. But in sickle cell anemia, it is usually the diaphysis that is involved. Overall, all the infections in bone are metaphyseal. But in sickle cell anemia, overall is salmonella and it's diaphyseal. If they ask you in sickle cell anemia metaphysis, they can ask like upper end of a bone, metaphyseal, Staph aureus, remember that. But otherwise, if they don't mention, salmonella, diaphyseal. IV drug abusers and foot wounds, Pseudomonas. Open injuries, Staph aureus. Human bites, Eikenella, an important point that might come in the future. Animal bite, Pasteurella. So these are important organisms that you must always remember. Most common area where you see osteomyelitis is lower end femur, and that is why the most common joint is the knee joint. You must remember that. In adults, it is the spine which is the commonest site. All three, the organism is going to be Staph aureus. Approach to osteomyelitis. Although MRI is one of the earliest sensitive and specific investigation radiologically, followed by bone scan, but the decision whether you operate or not operate will depend upon what X-ray shows you. Reduced movement of a limb, toxic child means not eating properly, not sleeping properly, high grade fever, decreased appetite. Toxic child, tender metaphysis goes towards a clinical diagnosis of osteomyelitis. Osteomyelitis less than 24 hours, X-ray is normal. MRI and bone scan will show you changes, and the treatment is non-operative, and the duration of antibiotic is usually 6 weeks. Usually 6 weeks, which is a better answer. Osteomyelitis more than 24 hours, X-ray will have changes. MRI and bone scan are already the same things, which are in less than 24 hours. Now when the X-ray has changes, you need to operate. So it is the X-ray which is more decisive to take whether we operate or not operate, and then the duration of antibiotics, whether you operate or you don't operate, stays the same, it's 6 weeks. Subacute osteomyelitis, Brodie's abscess, usually slow grumbling infection, a sclerotic margin lytic cavity with a sclerotic margin in the metaphysis, very common in the upper end of tibia or maybe lower end of tibia. And this is classical subacute osteomyelitis. If subacute word is not there, then only you will choose chronic. But if subacute word is there, it's a subacute osteomyelitis. In Brodie's abscess, the sclerotic margin indicates the body's immunity is trying to stop it. It means it will only be seen in immunocompetent host. It means that it will not be seen in HIV positive individual, which is very, very important. This is one of the questions. Brodie's abscess was asked in NB pattern 2019 January exam. Chronic osteomyelitis is one pick that is universally coming everywhere now. Back-to-back NB exams, a very commonly asked question in case of PGI. The pathognomic of chronic osteomyelitis is a dead bone, sequestrum. Sequestrum, according to English literature, means isolated in a cavity. It is a cause of a draining sinus in an infection. The sequestrum in the cavity is surrounded by a reactive bone which is called as an involucrum. So you will have sequestrum in the center surrounded by involucrum. So they can put an arrow inside or on the periphery like they did this exam in November AIIMS, where they had marked on involucrum and you need to pick it. Then you have cloacae, which are sinuses draining through the involucrum coming on. And then if you do not treat chronic osteomyelitis on time, it can lead to some complications like amyloidosis and malignancy. And the malignancy which is there in the chronic process is always squamous cell carcinoma or SCC. This is what I was telling you about. They can show you a cavity where you can mark the inside of the sequestrum or the periphery as the involucrum or the draining sinuses that are cloacae. Deformed sclerosed bone, white is dead bone. Whatever is white and light is a sequestrum, dead bone. Whatever is alive will bleed, dead will not bleed. That's the rule. And then the involucrum surrounding the sequestrum makes a rim seen on MRI, and this rim sign is seen on MRI. In which investigation? MRI in chronic osteomyelitis. This is again a question that came in DNB. And then when you want to treat osteomyelitis, number one treatment is remove the sequestrum, the focus of infection in the center, the dead bone. Control the infection, identify the organism and kill it. One of the most important things in infection is to control the infection, obviously. Followed by fill the gap. The cavity inside should be filled up. Can be filled up with a bone graft, which is usually taken in the body from the iliac crest, or by a bone cement, which is polymethyl meth acrylate, which is PMMA or bone cement. And then finally cover the soft tissue, because everything which is white in human body should be covered. So provide a good soft tissue coverage. One of the methods to obtain a good soft tissue coverage is NPWT, also called as vacuum assisted closure, also called as negative pressure wound therapy. A very, very hot pick in today's case. Before I go ahead, I want to talk about the paprika sign. Paprika sign means the bleeding bone on removal of a dead bone. So when you remove the dead bone, which will not bleed, the moment the live bone comes, that's called a bleeding point. They are called as paprika sign. It means adequate sequestrum has been removed. So paprika sign is valuable in cases of chronic osteomyelitis. And then talking about negative pressure wound therapy or vacuum assisted closure. You do a vacuum dresses so that it enhances the formation of the granulation tissue. It can be continuous or intermittent application of a negative pressure in the range of -75 to -125 millimeters of mercury. It can give you a good granulation tissue. It should never be done in cases of a malignancy, untreated osteomyelitis or some necrotic eschar. It's a very, very important topic back to back in the mid-year exams. One of the varieties of chronic osteomyelitis is Gary's osteomyelitis, Gare osteomyelitis, what you must remember is seen in mandible. That is the most important thing. The reference is Robbins' textbook of pathology. Very few literature books mention about it, and it's a very hot pick in the exams, especially single liners. SAPHO syndrome is an autoimmune disorder. It's an autoimmune disorder which is HLA-B27 positive. It is also called as chronic recurrent multifocal osteomyelitis, but it's a misnomer because it is not osteomyelitis, there is osteitis. That is hyperostosis, thickening and inflammation of the bone, but there is no infection. It's actually an autoimmune disorder, and it's a short form of synovitis, acne, pustulosis, hyperostosis, and osteitis, and hence it's an autoimmune disorder. So the treatment is disease-modifying anti-rheumatoid drug or NSAIDs or steroids. So when they talk about multifocal osteomyelitis, your answer should be SAPHO syndrome as number 1. If SAPHO syndrome is not there, then you can choose second number as sickle cell anemia and salmonella. They also can involve multiple bones, but the number 1 that you need to pick up is the SAPHO syndrome. Infections of the finger have become a trend nowadays. We had a question coming in the latest NB exam 2019. There are 3 major infections of the finger that we must know. The most common infection is called as paronychia, which is infection of the nail bed. In fact, sometimes to treat this, you need to take out a part of a nail so that the pus can come out. Another very common infection, one of the favorites of the examiners, is infection of the pulse space of finger, which is called as Fallon or Whitlow. When you have to drain this infection, you have to go vertically. You can't go horizontal, or fish mouth incision horizontal is not permitted. So you need to go vertically in case of Fallon or Whitlow. You need to take out a part of a nail sometimes in case of paronychia. Both Staph aureus is the commonest organism. So Fallon or Whitlow most commonly involves the thumb followed by index finger. Vertical incision is given, horizontal is contraindicated. If you do not treat it on time, it can lead to a complication where infections of the bone or the tendon sheath can occur, called as osteomyelitis or tenosynovitis. Paronychia is the infection of the nail bed. It is the most common infection of the hand. And this is what is coming nowadays, infectious tenosynovitis. It is the infection of the tendon sheath of fingers in which you have Canavel sign. There are 4 Canavel signs that you must remember, which are pain on stretch, uniform swelling, flexion of the finger, and the most important, which is most significant, is tenderness. You need to understand some important spaces in forearm, in the hand. In our hand, we have a thenar space which includes the index finger tendons and the first lumbrical. So thenar space does not contain the thenar muscles. It is space containing index finger tendons and the first lumbrical. Then you have the mid-palmar space, which consists of the other fingers, their tendon sheaths, along with the lumbricals. You have an ulna bursa going around the little finger, which can communicate with the tendon sheath. And then you have a radial bursa along the thumb. These 2 bursa can communicate in the forearm with the forearm space of perona. So the infections of the little finger, so the ulna bursa, can go to the thumb by the radial bursa to the forearm space of perona. The question that came in NB pattern this year spoke about this point of communication, that the little finger infections can go to the thumb, but they can't go to the index finger. Infectious tenosynovitis is very commonly asked in exams. If you are a doctor, you must remember these 2 positions of the lower limb called as Faber and Fader. Faber is flexion, abduction, external rotation of the lower limb, and it's mainly a position in which the capacity of the hip joint increases. In cases of Faber, there is lengthening of the limb. So if you have flexion, abduction, external rotation of the lower limb, flexion, abduction, extension of the limb, that is Faber. Opposite of it is Fader, flexion, adduction, internal rotation. In this, usually the limb is shortened. We must remember the important causes of Faber and Faber. Number 1 is synovitis. More space is required for the proliferating synovium. synovitis. Then is infection, in which it's a misnomer that septic arthritis is actually not arthritis, it's pus in the joint. Arthritis means damage to the cartilage, and septic arthritis, if you treat it properly, the cartilage damage can be prevented. And then you have iliotibial band contracture, a band from the ilium going till the tibia crosses the hip and the knee. Because of the contracture, which is permanent shortening, it will cause flexion, abduction, extension of the lower limb. Faber or flexion, abduction, external rotation of the lower limb can occur in polio because of iliotibial band contracture. And then anterior dislocation of the hip, where the head comes out of the acetabulum, is a common cause. As opposed to it, Fader will have posterior dislocation. Posterior dislocation is more common, that is why in case of Fader it's number 1 cause. Anterior is rare, that's why in Faber it's number 4 cause. Second common thing is arthritis, where there is damage to the cartilage. Posterior dislocation is 90% of the total dislocations of the hip joint. And Faber is married to anterior dislocation of hip, and Fader to the posterior dislocation of hip in case of trauma. So whenever there is anterior dislocation, it will have Faber. Whenever there is posterior dislocation, there will be Fader. Anterior dislocation will have lengthening, posterior will have shortening. If you have a joint in which there is septic arthritis or infection of the joint in infancy, it can destroy, this is a femur epiphysis, it can destroy the entire femur epiphysis. Because the femur epiphysis is totally destroyed, it leads to a hypermobile hip joint. Tom Smith arthritis is a septic arthritis of hip joint where the capital femoral epiphysis is destroyed, is a repeated question of NB pattern 2018 and mid-exam DNB 2018. Whenever there is infection of the subcutaneous tissue, it can lead to mycetoma. Mycetoma are two types, bacterial, which is more aggressive, caused by actinomycetes, or fungal, which is slowly grumbling infection. They lead to a painless swelling of a limb, discharging sinuses through which the granules come out. On MRI, dot in the circle sign is seen as if the granules are in the center of the sinus. Mycetoma is a painless condition. You need to remember in orthopedics, one more painless condition in orthopedics that you need to remember is Charcot's joint. Both mycetoma and Charcot's are painless conditions that one must remember. These are two things that you must remember, never forget. Let us have a look at the questions. Synovial tenosynovitis or flexor tendon, what is the correct option? The affected finger is extended. No, it is flexed. It has to be conservatively managed. It has to be managed conservatively, but operative indications are also there. So this is plus minus. Little finger infection can spread to the thumb but not to index finger. This is correct. Patient presents minimal. It is a severely painful condition. So if you have to choose between C and B, C is a better answer. 12-year-old male came with a swelling of lower end tibia, which is surrounded by a rim of reactive bone. What is the most likely diagnosis? This is a young boy with a lesion with a sclerotic margin. So my answer will be going towards the Brodie's abscess. Tibia will be the usual example in Brodie's abscess. They will usually be giving you tibia with Brodie's abscess. Which among the following occurs in immunocompetent host? Again, another way of asking the same thing. The answer is Brodie's abscess. Otherwise, in HIV positive, Brodie's will not occur. A child presented with fever and discharging pus from the thigh for 3 months. Following in the X-ray, identify the label structure. So in the exam, what they had done, they had marked on involucrum. So in the exam, when the question came, they had marked an arrow on the involucrum and that was the answer there. So involucrum is the answer in this question. If they would have marked in the center of the sequestrum or in the cloacae, they could have done any one of them. Tom Smith arthritis, septic arthritis of hip joint in infants, involves the hip joint in infant where the capital femoral epiphysis is eaten up. Most common site of osteomyelitis in children is metaphysis, and the most common site is lower end femur, which is also the most common site overall. A patient has a history of road traffic accident for 2 years back. He develops pain and swelling. X-ray has the following feature. What will diagnosis? Now you have a deformed bone. We have a deformed bone with some cavities. So this goes towards a diagnosis of chronic osteomyelitis. Deformed bone, lower end femur is the usual example they always give you in cases of this. Chronic recurrent multifocal osteomyelitis. SAPHO syndrome is number 1, and then sickle cell anemia or salmonella. Since we have SAPHO syndrome in the example, that should be the correct answer. Negative pressure wound therapy, false. Negative pressure is the name. Use intermittently or continuously, both can be done. Can give good granulation tissue, true. Pressure is 30, wrong, because it has to be negative. Necrotic SR is contraindicated, yes, such as untreated osteomyelitis or a malignancy. Thank you. Bone and joint tuberculosis. Bone and joint tuberculosis is usually secondary. It will come from the lungs. Second common site is lymph nodes. Comes through the blood, and it is difficult to isolate the bacilli. The order of involvement is SRK, Shah Rukh Khan, SHK, spine apnea. As you go from top to bottom, the incidence goes down. TB spine is also called as pot spine because he was the first man who suffered from this disease, and he described it, pot spine. Tuberculosis of the shoulder is dry, there is no effusion, so it has been labeled as caries sicca. And tuberculosis of finger has a name called as spina ventosa. Very, very important point. If I look at a vertebra above and a vertebra beneath, and if I look at the intervening disc, the lower half of upper vertebra, the upper half of lower vertebra, and the disc, they arise from the same mesodermal somite. Thus, they have the same artery supplying them. So, they have the same segmental artery supplying them. So, it will go to two contiguous vertebrae. So, the spread will occur in paradiscal area because one segmental artery supplies the mesodermal somite. So, whatever will come through the blood will go into a vertebra above and a vertebra below. If I look at a vertebra, the body, then the pedicle, then the lamina, and then the spinous process, the incidence of infection coming from anterior to posterior keeps on going down. That is why in tuberculosis, rarest involved is the facet joints followed by the spinous process. According to your MCQs, facet joint is never a choice. That's why spinous process. Tuberculosis most commonly involves the thoracolumbar or dorsolumbar area in total, followed by dorsal, followed by lumbar, and at the line end dorsolumbar junction. This is the order in which the incidence keeps on decreasing. In many of your books, it's given as dorsolumbar junction, so better answer is dorsolumbar area. Tuberculosis, the earliest symptom is pain. The earliest sign, obviously because of pain, is tenderness. But the earliest neurological sign is increased deep tendon reflex or clonus. So they are the earliest neurological features indicating nerve root or cord compression. Whenever you have an infection of spine or tuberculosis of any area, the first principal modality is to start with anti-tubercular therapy, in which rifampicin is the most important drug. It's a combination chemotherapy, but rifampicin is very, very important. Followed by rest to the body part and surgery when indicated. Surgery is not done in all the cases, and it is not that it's always done. So, it is called as middle path regimen. You will individualize each case and then decide about whether to operate or not. So, middle path regimen is done. So, indication of surgery in any disease of spine are bowel bladder involvement, worsening status, no improvement. So, if a patient on suspected TB spine does not have control over the urinary tracts or the bowel involvement, you need to operate. If in spite of giving your treatment he keeps on worsening, you need to operate. If in spite of giving your treatment he does not improve, you need to operate. So these are three indications for any disease of spine: trauma, tumor, TB, anywhere disc prolapse, you can use these indications. Whenever we want to operate a spine, we can remove the anterolateral aspect of the vertebra or the anterior aspect of the vertebra and put a bone graft. Both the treatments are almost similar, except that anterior decompression has slightly better results. Remember, whenever you are operating, you want to decompress through the anterior side because the disease is anterior. So in TB spine, never touch the posterior element because disease will destroy anteriorly. If you will destroy posterior, there will be gross instability all around. Let's understand some terms which are very important, which are also connected to the tuberculosis of different parts of the body. The best treatment for a joint damage is arthritis. The best treatment for a deformity is osteotomy. Best treatment for a joint damage, arthritis, is arthroplasty or joint replacement. The best treatment for a deformity is osteotomy. So if somehow arthroplasty cannot be done for a joint damage, then we will have to look at something different like fusion of the joint, which is called as surgical fusion of a joint, which means arthrodesis. Arthro means joint, desis means fusion. Whenever the surgical fusion will occur, it will be bony and it will be painless. It will have two features. As compared to it, when a disease will fuse a joint, it will be called as a pathological fusion. Pathological fusion is divided into two parts according to severity and the quality. If there is complete fusion, it's called as a bony fusion, which is called as solid fusion. So bony is solid, and whenever it's bony, it's going to be painless. S for solid, S for septic. So septic arthritis will have bony fusion. S for solid, S for TB spine, again will have bony fusion. S for solid, S for spondylitis. Ankylosing spondylitis will again have bony fusion. In fact, the fusion of ankylosing spondylitis, the bony fusion, has been called as the bamboo spine. Whereas in the fibrous fusion, it's going to be painful because fibrous has F, painful has F. TB spine causes bony fusion, TB everywhere else causes fibrous fusion. And then R, rheumatoid arthritis, will also cause fibrous fusion. One of the names that you must remember is cobra plate, which is used for hip arthrodesis. So remember, pot spine will have bony fusion and other parts in the body will be fibrous fusion. When we look at joint which is replaced, if you put an implant and fix that implant with a cement, it is called as a cemented implant. Whereas if you put an implant without cement, directly the bone coat over the implant, it is called as uncemented replacement. Since in uncemented replacement the bone has to coat over the implant, it is for young individuals which have got normal bone. Whereas cemented is for elderly. Cemented is cheaper and uncemented is costlier. And it also has a long half-life because it's a better quality. Cemented has a shorter half-life. This is very, very important. If you replace half the joint, it's called as hemiarthroplasty. So in the hip joint, if you just replace the femoral side, it's hemiarthroplasty. There are two types of hemiarthroplasty that you must remember. One is Austin Moore. It has two O's together, double O. So it has two holes, two fenestrations. The other is Thompson, which is non-fenestrated. One more thing. Both has two O's, but in Thompson the two O's are at a distance, so it is not fenestration. The one which has two O's together is got fenestrations. When you also replace the acetabular site, it is called as total hip replacement. Total hip replacement had lots of complication, like it can cause infection, dislocation. Myocardial infarction is number one cause of mortality. Cardiorespiratory arrest is number 2 cause of mortality. And the third one is pulmonary embolism, which is number 1 asked MCQ in this topic. Pulmonary thromboembolism after a replacement will occur after 48 hours. Embolic phenomena, they always have an interval, minimum 24 hours, but ideally 48 hours. How will you diagnose an embolic phenomenon history basis in your MCQs? The first way they give you is a patient has undergone THR or TKR. After 48 hours, he became breathless. Right side changes in the heart, in ECG and echo are seen. What's your diagnosis? Pulmonary embolism. What will you do? Thrombolysis. Similarly, they can give you a history. A child was applied a cast for 4 weeks. After 4 weeks, the cast was removed and the child has excruciating pain in the calf. Mother did a vigorous massage for 30 minutes. The child collapsed, could not be revived, expired. This came as an article on 2nd May 2017 and came as an MCQ on 9th May 2017. And then further, the third question is fracture shaft femur. A patient has got breathlessness, saturation dropping out. What do you suspect? I suspect fat embolism. So these are 3 scenarios: replacement, pulmonary embolism, cast, pulmonary thromboembolism subsequent to DVT, and then fat embolism because of fracture shaft femur after 48 hours duration. The other complications are metal associated complication. Metallic ions can grow in the circulation and cause hypersensitivity. They can cross the kidney barrier and damage renal insufficiency. They can cross the placenta and damage the fetus teratogenicity. They can cause chromosomal abnormalities, and very rarely they can cause cancers, carcinogenesis. These are important ones. That's why in young females in reproductive age group, because of teratogenicity, metallic replacements are contraindicated. At the upper end of femur, we have a triangular space where the infections of tuberculosis are very common. But the most common area where tubercular infections are seen is acetabulum in the hip joint. When there is infection of the acetabulum, that's the commonest site, and Babcock's triangle, the upper end of femur, is the commonest site on femur. Overall is acetabulum. Stage 1 is synovitis, and as earlier discussed, synovitis will cause fever and there will be lengthening. Stage 2 is early arthritis, and there will be 1 centimeter shortening and farther. Late arthritis will have more than 1 centimeter shortening, and when the femoral head is destroyed, the acetabulum is destroyed. The destroyed femoral head migrates from one corner of acetabulum to the other. It is called as a wandering acetabulum. And finally, because spine is solid fusion, peripheral joints is fibrous, so here there will be fibrous ankylosis, right? Any inflammatory disorder, whether it's infection or non-infection or inflammatory arthritis, will have increased blood supply around the joint and will cause periarticular osteopenia. So sclerosis will not be there, it will be osteopenia, means light color, black colored bone will be seen. When we compare in tuberculosis knee, tubercular knee is starting with synovium, and the comfortable position for hip is faber, for the knee is flexion of the knee. And so when you have a flexion of a knee in a child who's limping, has a gradual onset of pain, you must think about in India, it can be a tubercular infection, which is very commonly asked. Now in tuberculosis, in the early stage, you saw there's a flexion because of synovitis, but as the disease continues, the iliotibial tract causes contracture and it keeps on causing a pull in this muscle in the knee joint, and at the knee joint, the iliotibial tract causes these deformities to occur because of flexion of the knee, extension of the leg, and the posterior subluxation of tibia, and the mnemonic for this condition is called as the PERF, which is a very, very important thing. Coming to next, let's have a look at the questions of tuberculosis. Which of the following statements of tubercular osteomyelitis is not true? It is a secondary osteomyelitis, it's good. Sequestrum is uncommon. Okay. Periosteal reaction is characteristic. Okay. Inflammation is minimal. So it is usually something which does not produce a periosteal reaction. So tubercular osteomyelitis does not have periosteal reaction. Sequestrum is uncommon. It's a type of secondary osteomyelitis. Inflammation is minimal. So it does not have characteristic periosteal reaction. Right? TB osteomyelitis is extremely rare. Spina ventosa is seen in phalanges. So it is a tuberculosis of the digits. Most common type of lesion in pot spine is one joint, one vertebra above, one vertebra below, paradiscal, called as two vertebral disease. Kari Sikka is seen in tuberculosis of shoulder. What causes both destruction of bone and reduction of joint space? Tuberculosis, because it involves the vertebra and the disc, so bone and cartilage both are involved. Which of the following is not true about management of POTS paraplegia? Chemotherapy is the mainstay of conservative management, it's always correct. Paraplegia not improving with conservative and indication of operative intervention, correct. Decompression via anterolateral is most preferred, it's absolutely correct. Posterior decompression instrumentation can be used to correct deformity, no, because in TB you never touch the posterior elements. Coming to bone tumors. The first thing that one must remember in bone tumors is that the biopsy is gold standard. It is the tissue which is diagnostic. Once we want to diagnose a bone tumor with a biopsy, we want to be sure whether we are dealing with a benign lesion or a malignant lesion. If biopsy is not given, then we need to know clinical features. In a benign lesion, we will have a well-defined margins. Whereas in malignant lesion, we have the ill-defined margins. So well-defined margins, benign lesion, ill-defined margins, malignant lesion. When we look at the consistency of any body tissue, we have three types of tissue: hard as a bone, firm as cartilage, soft. Whenever we touch any bone anywhere, it will be throughout hard or cartilage or soft. Benign tumors will resemble the parent tissue, so they will be uniformly hard if coming from bone, or firm if coming from cartilage, or soft if coming from soft tissue. So they have well-defined margins and uniform consistency. Whereas malignant will have ill-defined margins and will have variable consistency. So uniform margins, well-defined margins, uniform consistency, benign. Variable consistency, ill-defined margins, malignant. And the next thing that we must remember to diagnose any bone tumor is age and part. Age of the patient like first decade, second decade or later, and part like epi, meta, dia. So part of the bone is more important than age. So these are important features with which we will diagnose the bone tumors. Regarding the age, one of the most important things that we must remember, when we look at a bone, epiphysis, physis and metaphysis, the age at which the epiphysis fuses with the metaphysis and the physis disappears is called as skeletal maturity. We need to remember the skeletal maturity of 6 major joints in human body: the shoulder, the wrist and the knee, elbow, hip and ankle. This particular position is called as the milking position of a human being. In the milking position of a human being, the 3 joints which look down are ossifying early at the age of 16 years. And the 3 joints that look up, they grow more till the age of 18 years. So we can remember it like this: shoulder is 18, elbow is 16, wrist is 18, hip is 16, knee is 18, ankle is 16. 18, 16, 18, 16, 18, 16. This is how you can alternate. So this is the skeletal maturity. So whenever they talk about patient is above skeletal maturity, more than 20. And usually the more serious things start after 40. So if they ask above skeletal maturity, more than 20 and less than 40, that's the usual age group. And more than 40 is usually a patient who's got more serious things. Then coming to the area involved. If they talk about epiphysis of a bone, chondroblastoma is number 1 tumor, followed by giant cell tumor. If they talk about epiphysis plus calcification, remember it's chondroblastoma. Metaphysis is the most common location of bone tumors. And then comes diaphysis, where you must remember 3 tumors: osteoid osteoma, adamantinoma Ewing's sarcoma. So these are three tumors that you remember. Adamantinoma will have soap bubble appearance in the middle of a bone. Giant cell tumor will have a soap bubble appearance at the end of a bone. Osteoid osteoma is a cortical lesion, so CT scan is valuable. Ewing's sarcoma clinically presents like osteomyelitis, important point. But the most common location where tumors are seen is metaphysis, and in the metaphysis, the most important tumor that you must remember is osteosarcoma. So when we talk about a tumor which is epiphyseal chondroblastoma more than giant cell tumor, only epiphysis plus calcification chondroblastoma. In the upper end of humerus, it's unicameral bone cyst more than chondroblastoma. If they talk about upper end humerus, unicameral bone cyst is in the metaphysis, chondroblastoma is in the epiphysis, further making it specific. In the metaphysis is the osteosarcoma, diaphyseal three tumors, osteoid osteoma, adamantinoma, Ewing's sarcoma. Epithelial tumors, it's not epiphyseal, epithelial tumors. Most importantly for tibialis, adamantinoma, and mandible ameloblastoma. Before 1985, these two tumors were interchangeable, but they are not now because it's the name of the bone which decides the name of the tumor in spite of having the same biopsy findings. And then remember a love triangle here, mandible. The most common tumor is SCC. So ameloblastoma likes mandible, but mandible ko squamous cell carcinoma pasand hai. It likes squamous cell carcinoma. And then for bone tumors, you have a necking classification which you must remember. Part is more important than age, already spoken about it. First decade, the most common tumor is Ewing's. Second decade, most common tumor is osteosarcoma, but Ewing's more number of cases are seen in the second decade than first. For example, if there are 10 cases in the first decade, 9 will be Ewing's. So Ewing's is the most common tumor in first decade. But if you look at the maximum number of cases, out of 100 cases of Ewing's, if 9 are in the first decade, 91 will be in the second decade. But 91 in the second decade means it's a very common tumor in the second decade. But the most common tumor in the second decade with thousands and thousands of number is osteosarcoma. So Ewing's and osteosarcoma mimic like osteomyelitis, and Ewing's and osteosarcoma peak at the second age, means the second decade, the same age they peak together. And then after skeletal maturity, if they write 30, you should go about giant cell tumor, the only tumor which can go till the joint. It can involve the cartilage according to Robbins. And then more than 40 years, the two most common tumors of the bone, metastasis and multiple myeloma. Metastasis is number one tumor of the bone, multiple myeloma number one primary tumor of the bone. And then we want to clean a cyst. Operative interventions in orthopedic oncology. If you want to clean a cyst, a single cavity, you go in, clean it, that's called as curettage. In Hindi, it's called as jharu lagana. In English, it's called as dry mopping. So when you just clean it, a simple cavity, simple bone cyst. But if it's an aggressive lesion, so simple dry mopping will not work. So you need to have wet mopping. So only dry mopping is curettage. Dry mopping with a wet mopping is extended curettage. In extended curettage, you use four chemicals. Phenol, because in our houses also in wet mopping, we use phenyl. So phenol, the most common chemical. Liquid nitrogen. This is an important one because it has got least chances of reoccurrence. It is the most efficient, potent. And then you will have other things which can be used like bone cement for extended curettage. It is carried out for multiple lesions like aneurysmal bone cyst, giant cell tumor, chondroblastoma, and chondroma. Aneurysmal bone cyst, giant cell tumor, chondroblastoma, and chondroma. These are four tumors for which you can do extended curettage. And now when you want to operate a bone tumor, there are four surgeries classically, apart from curettage, extended curettage, four more. You can remove the contents from the center called as intralesional excision. You can remove the tumor from the margins called as marginal excision. You can take a normal cuff of tissue all around called as wide local excision, and you can remove the whole bone called as the radical excision. So these are the four types of lesions which can be done, which can be excised, and the most common is wide local excision, where a normal cuff of tissue of about 3 cm is taken away with the bone tumor. So this is a very, very important page which is talking about how to treat bone tumors. On treatment of bone tumors, the first thing is benign tumors is always operated because ortho is an operative branch. So benign tumors always operated. Cartilaginous tumors operated because they are chemo resistant, radio resistant. So cartilaginous tumors, chemotherapy doesn't function, so you operate it. Most common surgery is wide local excision with 3 cm margin. If you have a simple cyst, unicameral bone cyst, a single cavity cyst or unicamera cyst or single kamre ki cyst, then you treat it with cystic lesion with curettage. But when you have a chemical to kill the cells, it's called as extended curettage. The most common chemical is phenol, and the best is liquid nitrogen with the least rate of reoccurrence. The 4 lesions where you do extended curettage is aneurysmal bone cyst, chondroblastoma, giant cell tumor, and chondroma. For any malignant lesions, the treatment is neoadjuvant chemotherapy followed by surgery followed by adjuvant chemotherapy. And now coming to the most important statement, Ewing's is the most radiosensitive bone tumor known to mankind. It melts like snow with radiotherapy according to Harrison textbook of medicine. But in spite of that, the treatment of Ewing's and osteosarcoma together is neoadjuvant chemotherapy followed by surgery followed by adjuvant chemotherapy. Although Ewing's is more radiosensitive, but radiosensitivity is not a prognostic factor, whereas chemosensitivity is. So chemotherapy plays the main role in Ewing's sarcoma along with surgeries. So when you have a lesion which is into multiple bones, it's called as a polyostotic lesions. So number 1 is osteochondroma, also called as exostosis. They are actually developmental malformations and they are not tumors. Then you have the next one, the enchondroma, which can have multiple lesions. And then you have fibrous dysplasia. Fibrous dysplasia and osteochondromas are developmental malformations. They are not exactly bone tumors. And then you have 2 more multiple lesions which are there, GCT and Ewing's sarcoma. So these are 5 tumors which can have multiple lesions. And then the radio-resistant bone tumor, if you want to remember, 1 is osteosarcoma. If you want to remember, 2 is chondrosarcoma. And if you want to remember, 1 more important along with osteosarcoma is malignant fibrous histiocytoma. These are radio-resistant bone tumors. But in case you need to choose one, choose osteosarcoma. Let's talk about the benign lesions now. Unicameral bone cyst is a single central cavity filled with fluid. It is seen in the first decade of life. It is metaphyseal. So it's in the upper end of humerus, single central cavity, metaphyseal, first decade of life. And now when there is a cortical hinge at the corner, with the movement of the fluid, the cortex moves up and down, up and down. In India, you have an actor called as Amitabh Bachchan. Amitabh Bachchan, whenever he enters a police station, he knocks this door and the door moves like this. This is called a trap door movement. Then Amitabh Bachchan is not shown, only the door is shown. So similarly, the cortex moves, it's called as a trap door movement. And when along with this door, this cortex falls at the bottom, it is called as the fallen leaf sign. It's called as the fallen leaf sign. So fallen leaf sign indicates that the cortex has dropped to the bottom of the cyst, which is a feature of unicameral bone cyst, which is treated with curettage and bone graft. It is a simple curettage and then aspiration and put a steroid, or aspirate and put a sclerosants. These are 3 options. This is a bone nibbler that one must know, and this is a curate, then we will see again later. And then aneurysmal bone cyst is a multiloculated eccentric lesion. So there are multiple septae and they go towards the corner. Right? And this is seen in second decade of life. It is seen in the metaphyses, and you should not be very aggressive in this tumor. You have to be careful because it's highly vascular. And then it has got fluid levels on MRI. And it's treated by extended curettage and embolization, which is very, very important. So single central cavity UBC, multiloculated eccentric with fluid levels is aneurysmal bone cyst. And then osteochondroma. They are developmental malformations, also called as exostosis. They go away from the joint, so they go away from the joint. When you touch them, you will touch the bone and the overlying cartilage. When you get an X-ray, you'll only see the bone. So they are larger to feel. They are smaller on X-rays. Osteochondroma are very, very important tumors. In osteochondroma, the most common cause of pain is overlying bursitis. In osteochondroma, you must also remember that it can turn malignant into chondrosarcoma. It happens when there is a loss of differentiation or growth after the skeletal maturity, or rapid growth in size of cartilage more than 2 centimeter. These are indicators of malignant transformation which can be seen on MRI if you're looking for the cartilage thickness. It's a tumor which arises from the periosteum. So when a tumor arises from the periosteum, you have to remove the periosteum along with the tumor to treat it. It's called as the extra periosteal resection. And then remember, a tumor which has got a lysis center with a surrounding sclerosis in the cortex, which has got night pain relieved on taking salicylates. Also called as aspirin. They have night pain relieved on taking salicylates or aspirin, and they are seen in the cortex of the lesion lysis with sclerosis. These are called as osteoid osteoma. And osteoid osteoma very, very important. Right? And osteoid osteoma is treated by radiofrequency ablation. It's burn it and finish it. One of the varieties of osteoid which is asymptomatic is seen on the skull called as compact or eburnated or ivory osteoma. It is one disease which requires no treatment. It's an incidental finding. They are like dots on the skull which can be seen. Codman's tumor. The bells ring into your ears as if they're talking about a Codman's triangle, but no. This is a tumor involving the epiphysis along with calcification. This is going to be chondroblastoma. So you have to learn, because this is one thing which is very commonly asked. Codman's tumor has got nothing to do with the Codman's triangle. And now coming to one of the most important things, fibrous cortical defect or non-ossifying fibroma. It is the most common benign lesion of the bone seen in the first decade. Metaphyseal, self-resolving, so nothing needs to be done. Further, it's not pre-malignant, which is very, very, very important. And chondroma, right, is the most common tumor of bones of hand and feet. On biopsy, hyaline cartilage is seen. This is a tumor where two syndromes are associated, Olliers and Maffucci. In Olliers syndrome, you have only multiple enchondromas. In Maffucci, there are many things like multiple enchondroma, hemangiomas and phlebolith. The images of Maffucci can be seen. Hemangioma, multiple enchondromas, phlebolith is a calcified superficial vein. Giant cell tumor, they are coming into the category of locally aggressive tumor. So they are not benign, they are not malignant, they are intermediate. Giant cell tumor is the only tumor which can go right till the joint surface. There is no other tumor known to mankind which can involve the cartilage, which is a feature of this tumor. Giant cell tumor follows the second love triangle. The first love triangle is ameloblastoma likes mandible, mandible likes squamous cell carcinoma. The second love triangle is giant cell tumor. Giant cell tumor likes lower end radius, but right, lower end radius likes giant cell tumor, but GCT likes lower end femur. So lower end radius, the most common tumor is GCT till proved otherwise. But if they ask you GCT most common location, so lower end femur is more commonly involved. And then you have two types of cells, the mononuclear cells and the giant cells. And the mononuclear cells are the malignant cells in GCT. Right? And then this is the tumor which is seen after maturity. One of the common bone tumors which can occur in females. They can show you the distal end of radius, which was shown in Ames November 2018. It was also shown in NB pattern 2019. This is the only tumor which can go right till the wrist joint. There is no other tumor. The infrastructure is gone. The architecture of the bone is gone. It's ready to collapse. This is also a tumor which is seen in the upper end of tibia after maturity. It's also the same tumor which is seen in upper end of femur, just close to the joint. And then these are three important images which have come since till now. And then you will get this image where you have to understand that it's involving right till the joint, and this is what is the feature of a giant. This is called as GCT, going till the joint in lower end femur, which happens to be the commonest site. The commonest treatment of GCT is extended curettage. Rarely you can excise it or replace with another bone like fibula, but this the most important treatment of a giant cell tumor is extended curettage. And then you need to differentiate between an aneurysmal bone cyst and a GCT. GCT is occurring after skeletal maturity and it occurs in the epiphysis. It goes till the joint. Whereas ABC is metaphyseal and it occurs before skeletal maturity. So aneurysmal bone cyst, metaphyseal, GCT, epiphyseal, remember that. the upper end of femur, because of a fibrous healing into the bone, the bony tubercle replaced with a fibrous tissue, becomes like a stick of a golf called as a Shepherd-Crook deformity. In Shepherd-Crook deformity, you have McAkuhn-Albright syndrome, where you have polyostotic fibrous dysplasia, means multiple bones are involved, precocious puberty and pigmentation, which is coffee colored spot. This is a very, very, very important slide which you must remember. Langerhans cell histiocytosis, histiocytic proliferation, when it destroys the entire human being, is let us say disease. When it destroys the skull with a single lesion, eyes or the endocrine system, it's called as a Henschel-Christian disease, and solitary bone or lung disease is called as eosinophilic granuloma. In the lung, the pulmonary histiocytosis. Skull will have a beveled lesion, which is a sloping lesion. Cells with the Burbeck granules in the nuclei are the tennis racket shape, and this is a lesion which is very commonly asked because it spontaneously disappears. Vertical striations in a vertebra, also called as a corduroy appearance or a jail bar pattern, is a feature of hemangioma. So there will be vertical striations in the vertebra in hemangioma. If you do CT scan of hemangioma, there is a theory question, polka dot sign is seen. If they show you sacrum, think about chordoma, not chondroma, chordoma. Chordoma is a tumor which is lytic in the sacrum. It's again a locally aggressive tumor. Pulsatile bone tumor is osteosarcoma. Remember, very, very controversial thing. Pulsatile bone tumor is osteosarcoma. Osteosarcoma is a cancer of youth, second decade of life. If you give radiotherapy to a patient and after a few years there's a tumor arising and you do a biopsy, it will be osteosarcoma. The time period will be 10 to 15 years. It's a radio-resistant bone tumor. It's a bone-forming bone tumor, matrix-forming or bone-forming tumor. And it's an osteosarcoma which is with germline retinoblastomas. It is the most common tumor with pain and night pain. Remember, night pain relieved on taking salicylates is osteoid-osteoma. But if they talk about pain or night pain, it's going to be osteosarcoma. It is also a tumor which occurs in the metaphysis. And it's also a tumor which occurs around the second decade. Osteosarcoma, poor prognostic factors are extent of a disease which is labeled as staging. Most common site of metastasis are pulmonary, which can also cause pneumothorax. Systemic mets are even poorer than pulmonary, and grade of a lesion is significant. It is treated by neoadjuvant chemotherapy followed by surgery followed by adjuvant chemotherapy. And the most important drug for osteosarcoma is methotrexate. Other counterpart is Ewing sarcoma, which again peaks in second decade and involves the femur again. Even in osteosarcoma is the lower end of femur, which is commonest. In Ewing sarcoma, it's the middle of a femur or diaphysis of the femur, which is commonest. Pain is a universal complaint here also, but more common in osteosarcoma. It presents like osteomyelitis. It is a classical tumor presenting like osteomyelitis. Ewing's is a tumor that takes origin from the marrow and goes and localizes into the diaphysis. It's a tumor from the marrow. That is why you need to do a marrow biopsy. So you will do a bone biopsy, like taking a biopsy from the femur. That's called as a bone biopsy. But then you will also take a biopsy from the iliac crest. That's called as a marrow biopsy. Then in Ewing's, it mimics like osteomyelitis. So if infection and fever, tissue is diagnostic. In Ewing sarcoma, you have onion peel appearance. Genetic defects of Ewing's are super common questions. It's a round cell tumor with glycogen positive cells. Characteristic translocation is 1122, but then there can be 21, 22 and 722. The bigger digit is always second. Trisomy 8, trisomy 12 and MYC2 or CD99 is a specific marker. Poor prognostic factors for Ewing's are relapse, chemoresistance and metastasis always poor. Chemosensitivity is important because that's the most important tool. Increased counts, increased ASR is again poor. Fever is marker. If Ewing's presents like osteomyelitis, is already poor prognosis, remember that. And then age more than 12. These are poor factors for Ewing's. Remember, Ewing's is always high grade. You never have a low grade Ewing's or intermediate grade. Ewing's is the most aggressive bone tumor known to mankind. And then chondrosarcoma, it arises around the pelvis, highly calcified hyperglycemia. So it's a tumor with calcification. Amongst the malignant tumors, it has the best prognosis followed by osteosarcoma, and Ewing's has the worst prognosis. In a multiple myeloma, remember the alkaline phosphatase will always be normal. It's a tumor which has got multiple lytic bone pains, high ESR, usually in the clinical scenario they give you more than 100, high calcium. They have serum or urine M proteins, bone marrow plasma cells or plasmacytoma, and they have end organ damage like lytic lesion in the skull, low hemoglobin, high calcium, increased creatinine, hyperviscosity, amyloidosis, or more than 2 bacterial infection per 12 months, which is a criteria. They have multiple lytic lesions all over the skull, and then if plasma cell destroys single body part, it's plasmacytoma. When they destroy the entire skeleton, multiple myeloma. When they destroy the whole body, and fatal is plasma cell leukemia, when there are more than 20% plasma cells in the smear. This is how the punched out lytic lesion appears, multiple lytic lesion on the skull. And then one rare tumor which is very common in entrance exam is synovial sarcoma. It's a misnomer, as synovial cell sarcoma does not arise from the synovium. Characteristic translocation is between chromosome X and 18, causing a gene called as SYT-SSX. It arises near the joint, the bursa. It's a biphasic tumor with epithelial and mesenchymal component, and treatment is surgical excision. Like every orthopedic tumor, normally a tumor will have a single component of malignancy, but here there are 2 components, so biphasic tumors. Lytic lesion of a skull is a spot diagnosis or discussed in an MCQ. Whenever they talk about lytic lesion of skull, remember this mnemonic of Mel Torme: metastasis, eosinophilic granuloma, one of the histocytosis. Another Langerhans cell histiocytosis, so twice in the mnemonic, lymphomas, tuberculosis, hyperparathyroidism, which is the rarest cause here, osteomyelitis, radiotherapy, multiple myeloma, and epidermoids are the other causes. So you will have punched out lytic lesion on the skull. So when you have punched out lytic lesion in the skull, you can have beveled or sloping lesions. You can have big permeative lesions, or you can have dots which are less connected to the parent thing, called as the salt pepper skull. So when you have beveled lesions, they are characteristically seen in eosinophilic granuloma, a sloping lesion. When you have large permeative lesions, it's seen in Langerhans cell histiocytosis. And when they talk about salt pepper skull, it is seen in hyperparathyroidism. Another varieties of skull with not lytic, they are cotton wool skull, which are seen in Paget's, also called as osteitis deformans. Another variety of skull seen in Paget's is osteoporosis circumscripta, where a large bone loss on the skull can be identified. And then you can have vertical hairs on the end of the bone, called as hair on end appearance, seen on the skull, which is a feature of hemolytic anemias like thalassemia.